So welcome our distinguished guests and speakers to the deep listening and empathy session at the ACMS, and how relevant it is after Marie's invitation, because at Ashoka, we strongly believe that any fixing the world's problems or any change making has to start with empathy and listening. So my name is Zeynep Meydanoğlu. I wear two hats at Ashoka. I'm the Turkey country co-director, and I'm the gender field leader for Next Now. And when I think about it, empathy is so central to both of these hats and roles. For one thing, the country we operate in continuously ranks up there with countries like United States, Brazil, in terms of how polarized it is, how low trust it is, and it's really hard to operate in such an environment where individuals and society is not coming from a place of empathy towards each other. And then on the gender side, the more we talk to social innovators, the more they are telling us that there exists a gender empathy gap on the individual level because of the very rigid gender roles that we are born into and we socialize into, that we are not able to perceive the whole human behind the gender role assigned to that person. So this is also coming up constantly in our research. So very, very central. And then when it comes to listening, it's kind of on a more personal level. But when I think about my career, all the positive feedback I got about my leadership was about me listening. So people often tell me I'm calm in crisis situations and I'm able to calm people. And when I rewind to those instances, it's actually because I'm able to listen to kind of what's going on and people expressing themselves. Or positive feedback is that people say, you help me grow, you see the potential in me, and again it's because I'm able to really observe what that person is doing. So if I've done any good leadership, I think it was due to listening skills and kind of working on them over the years. So our session, I'm especially excited about it because of these reasons. It brings together three extraordinary women, extraordinary change leaders from relatively different walks of life. And there's a thread that ties them together. Unsurprisingly, it's the fact that they have empathy and deep listening as a defining feature of their leadership. And moreover, they've made it part of their life mission at the same time and social impact. And we're going to hear from them on how that's working out for them so far. But I want to introduce first our technical host, Ezgi, who's going to tell us a bit about our housekeeping rules and how we manage the space together. Ezgi, over to you.
Thank you, Zeynep. And hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. This is Ezgi from Ashoka, Turkey, and I'm connecting from Istanbul. I'm your session coordinator for this session, meaning I will be the bridge between our panelists and our audience. So please put your comments into the live discussion on the right side of the screen on your swap card page. And please put your questions into the questions tab on the chat tool. Once Zeynep opens the floor to me, I will be directing your questions to our panelists. So before we start, please let us know where are you connecting from, and have a great 1 hour. Thank you. Back to you, Zeynep.
Thank you, Ezgi. I'll go right ahead and briefly introduce our speakers. I'll start with Kinari Webb, who is joining us from San Francisco. Good morning, Kinari. And basically, it's a very interesting life journey. So Kinari is a Yale Med School graduate turned social entrepreneur. She works in 3 different locations across the globe, and her organization, Health and Harmony, uses radical listening to save rainforests and the local communities that inhabit them, and also save all of us because they are saving the lungs of our planet at the same time. And the direct result of that radical listening is innovation and impact. They run programs like the chainsaw buyback program, where they actually buy back the chainsaws from the local community that they were using to destroy the trees, and they start them up as agripreneurs. Or they have a green credit system where if as a village you switch to an entirely sustainable economy, you get 70% discount on your health costs. So this all came about as a result of radically listening to the local communities. And their success is, in just one site in Indonesia, the carbon they save includes to 14 years of San Francisco's carbon emissions. So they know impact, and I strongly urge you to visit their website and see all this, and Kinari will tell us all about it. Then it's my honor to introduce Mary Gordon and Roots of Empathy. I call them kind of the public health approach to the world's entire problems. So basically, it's a prevention for any social problem you can imagine. They run proven empathy-based programs for children to ensure that children develop empathy today and for the future. And more empathic future generations automatically mean less conflict, more kindness, more care, and less social problems. So I think it's a genius prevention method. They reach about 1 million children across 4 continents, 17 countries, and they have a very innovative program where they bring baby teachers to classrooms. And in some countries, this has become official public school curriculum. Pleasure to have you with us, Mary. And last but not least, we have Vuslat, hailing from Istanbul, also my hometown. And Vuslat is a leading businesswoman and philanthropist, and a lifetime dedicated to what I call voice and dialogue. So she was in the past decade running Turkey's most influential and voiceful newspaper, Hürriyet, and also a whole media group. On the social side, her and her family have been very influential in achieving the first hotline addressing domestic violence, changing public opinion about girls' education. And Vuslat herself often speaks about gender equity, Islamophobia, importance of free press, throughout her life. And now she's at a very interesting point where she's launching a new initiative with a contagious vision, in my opinion. And she's asking what would happen if generous listening became the norm in human interaction. And that just, even trying to imagine that for a moment gives me goosebumps. So thank you, Vuslat, for joining us. So without further ado, I'll pose my first question to our speakers, and I will ask our participants and the speakers to turn on their deep listening. So if you can turn that switch on and really try to listen to what you're hearing with your whole self, and we will do a round of what resonated with the speakers, so we will hear from them after this first question. But also feel free to drop in the chat what's resonating with you once you hear the responses. My first question is actually about what difference does it make? So what difference does it make when you're able to really listen deeply in your work life, in your private life? What happens when that switch goes on? And Vuslat, may we start with you?
Sure. Listening, on the contrary, listening seems like it's an effort, but when you, it's especially in our hectic life, it's too much time. We don't have that much time to give each other or to ourselves. But especially as I embarked on this journey, but even before, when you listen, really take the time to listen. Contrary to the common knowledge, everything becomes effortless. I think this is my biggest takeaway from listening. Everything becomes much less effortless the relationships you build up, my intimate relationships within my family, my relationship within myself, and with my colleagues. It's everything kind of falls together in a magical way. So much less effortless. I always used to think, is it possible to live in an effortless way? But yes, listening is a beautiful, huge, big step to make it happen. This is the most important thing, but it's also gives a way. It also opens a door for you to explore the unknown territory. Anything that you can invite in your life as a surprise to grow, to improve, to meet at other places. That's another thing. It brings surprise to your world. It brings um, feeds your curiosity, and it's, I should admit, it's not always also very easy. I don't know if we will have time to go into that, but I want to be also very honest, because listening also takes you to places that most of the time, maybe that's why we neglect. We do not want to listen, but to places that that make you uncomfortable, but only in that uncomfortable zone, only in that out of comfort zone, um, we can build something new. We can also connect authentically with each other. This is what it brings into my life.
Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you. Kinari, you're giving a high five.
Oh
What
yeah,
difference does it make for you?
I loved all those points. It's so true. It makes work effortless. That, although it's not easy, right? Just like you said, both of those things are simultaneously true. The skill of learning to listen is not easy, but when you do it, it can make work just flow in a way you could have never imagined. And you're going to find things surprising. So we did in Indonesia, we listened to these indigenous and local communities who lived around the forest. We said, you all are guardians of this precious rainforest that is valuable to the whole world. What would you all need as a thank you from the world so you could actually protect it? Because they were logging like crazy. Why were they logging when we knew from a baseline survey that they loved the forest and wanted to protect it? And we didn't really know. We spent 400 hours of listening at our first site in the first year. That's a lot, right? I discovered later you didn't actually need that many hours, but we did that many hours because I thought like every single community was going to come to a different solution, but they didn't. Every single community, after about an hour and a half in a circle, people just, us listening to them, asking them that question and them listening to each other, they would come to a consensus where they would say, this is the right solution. And it was a surprise. What they said was, we need healthcare access. Without that, we cannot stop logging. Because if our child is going to die and the only way we can get enough money is to log the rainforest, even though we know that forest is important for that child's future, we will do it. And that's the right decision, right? The other thing they said was they wanted training in sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture, organic farming, which I was like, why don't you just talk to your grandparents? Like, what do you mean you need that, right? But it was actually, the traditional way of agriculture was different. It was slash and burn. And so they'd heard that you could plant in one place without buying chemical fertilizers, and they didn't know how to do it. So we listened. We did what they said. That's when I add the radical part to listening, that's what I mean. We actually did what they said. And it worked. It worked stunningly. It worked better than I could have possibly imagined. And it worked not only in sort of outcomes, right? Like 90% drop in illegal logging households, 67% drop in infant mortality, saving of this enormous rainforest. We invested over 10 years, $5.2 million. They gave back $65 million worth of carbon. So like really huge impacts. But almost more importantly is when I'm there, people come up to me all the time and say, boy, you know, when I designed this program, I did such a good job. And we are now the pathfinders for where the world needs to go and how to live in balance with the earth. And now we want to teach the world, right? That sense of empowerment, that sense of we came up with a solution and we were right. And that's a very different thing than normal development organizations, which are completely colonial, right? And colonial is as far from listening as you can get, right? We're the experts, we're coming in, we're doing exactly, you have to do what we say.
Kinari, thank you so much for this. I mean, kind of like you're so right, actually. The dynamic in colonialism also has to do with who's speaking, who's listening, who's not listening. And I think you just made the economic case for radical listening. You invest 5 million, you get back 65 million. So very inspiring in that sense too. Mary, over to you. What difference does it make?
Saying the premise of our entire program is authentic dialogue and authentic listening. And we basically are baby whisperers, because a baby is the most vulnerable citizen in the world. They can't talk. And how do you represent your rights? And really the idea, one of the missions of Roots of Empathy actually is to break intergenerational cycles of violence and poor parenting. So it's about putting right so many of the wrongs in the world and the injustices. So when you let little children see in their classroom how to really listen to a baby, they are learning to interpret the baby's vocalizations. Is that a sound that sounds calm or worried? They are learning to read the baby's body language. Are the fists opened or closed? So in my view, this beautiful term of radical listening or emotion listening, or however we want to look at it, is very much how do we find one another through the thicket of words. It's not usually the content of what people say that is the big communication. So in our work, it's amazing when you see children develop the capacity to truly listen to one another. It means they leave all their biases behind. It means they leave their judgments behind. Because if you start to listen to someone with a preconceived idea of who they are and what the value is of what they might say, you've already lost the communication. And a big thing that I so appreciate about this deep listening is that it allows you to have deeper relationships. It could, if you wanted it to, allow you to have many more relationships, because if you start really listening to somebody, you connect with them. And a relationship is an emotional connection. And when you listen deeply, whether you're trying to understand whether it's about their values, about the forest and their decisions, it gives you a sense of their authentic selves, what they value, what motivates them. And if you can appreciate where a person is coming from in their own lives, in their own feelings, because change is motivated more by how people feel about something than rather what they know cognitively about it. So I think it's amazing in that you can have more deep, meaningful relationships, and you can support others, because when another person feels heard, they feel acknowledged, and it gives them the courage and confidence, whether they're 5 years old or 50 years old, to trust themselves. Because so many people in the world, particularly where we have the issues of domestic violence, which is one of the cycles we're trying to break, people don't trust themselves. And this gift of really giving someone 100% of your attention, not just listening to their words, but following the tone and cadence of their voice, following their body language. They know. And in fact, the younger the child, the more deeply they appreciate if you are understanding them. Even if there are no words spoken, touch, of course, is the biggest communicator. So I think the older we get in life, the more easily we're fooled by people's talk. But if you deep listen, there's no fooling. It's authentic.
And that's why you begin with the children, because they are kind of not contaminated yet, and it's like such a big return on kind of whatever you invest. And Mary, thank you also for kind of, you also made the case for the relationship between generous listening and happiness, I think, because you mentioned the relationships and over and over, and Kinari would know, she's also a medical doctor and follows the research. So the more the research is showing that the source of happiness is actually having meaningful relationships in life. It's not so much wealth or anything else. So there's also a case for generous listening to lead a fulfilling life. And we cannot see the event chat, unfortunately, but Ezgi tells me that there's a lot of engagement going on there. And some of our participants are highlighting the same thing. So many of them are saying, actually, it's about connections. And kind of when you listen deeply, they connect deeper to themselves, others, and the life on this planet. And also shifting from listening to reply to someone versus listening to understand, which was very concrete in Kinari's words. I think that, are you listening with what intention? So thank you. I want to again ask a general question to all three of you, and it's just so we know what's on your agenda these days. So very concretely in your work, what project excites you? What upcoming meeting excites you, and why? Is there? I know for all of you there are such things coming up, but so I'll ask Mary first. Mary, what's exciting you on your calendar these days?
Well, let me call it excitement or panic. It depends on what moment of the day you ask me, because you can appreciate we have a very experiential program where we hold complete silence and listen for a baby's breath. So the pandemic came along. So we had a baby on a green blanket in a classroom. Now we have a baby on a screen in children's homes or in their classroom. So we had to completely reinvent and reimagine how you can build this connection between a baby, the humanity of a baby, and the children's own humanity, and then finding the humanity in one another through a screen. And I'm no tech whiz, let me promise you. So I am completely pumped, excited about all this new learning. We have identified new teams that have come together from the existing teams. We've melded our research department with our communication department, because I have to know with every class, how are we doing? It's not good enough to think that you've hit the ball. You have to know. So I'm beyond excited. I hate to waste the time to sleep. Imagine that. Because there are so many exciting ideas. It's been an avalanche of innovation. And I think nimble, we joke about the word nimble. I've always said we only hire people who are nimble. I don't care how smart you are. If you can't hop, you're not nimble. We don't need you. But now these nimble people are coming out, and we've got, we're reinforcing the rights-based Roots of Empathy program. So I have to say every sunrise is an excitement for me, because of all the gorgeous people that we're able to work with, and the feedback that we're getting, which encourages us. We're kind of only one lesson away for people delivering it. So that's the panic piece, but that's my excitement. And I mean, there are other lovely things happening, but I have to say I've got tunnel vision till I get all the new curriculum completed.
Amazing and exciting, because it makes it accessible to, say, people in Turkey as well, maybe, or closer, if and when you crack this virtual aspect. And I think your learnings will light the way for others as well, others promoting generous listening online or connections online. So very excited, we'll be following you, Mary, on this quest. Kinari, what about you? What excites you in the mornings these days?
Mary, it's so exciting to hear you say that, and I think that for us as well, what happened with the pandemic is suddenly this like, whoa, we got to be nimble. We got to completely refigure out how we're going to do all this stuff, right? And there are huge benefits of that, right? Like your work really may go global in a way that you couldn't have imagined. And that if, you know, that beforehand, even though you were already doing 1,000,000 kids, which is amazing, you could do 1 billion, right? Like, why not, right? Like, you know, and when we look at this is similar to what we've done too. We're looking at the world and we're like, we're in trouble. Like, we're in trouble on a scale that has never happened in the history of this planet, right? And this is the most important time in human history. And we have to reduce emissions by half by 2030, right? That's like a total panic for us, right? And we've already scaled in Indonesia, in Madagascar, and in Brazil. We're working in about 9 million hectares of forest already, but it's not enough, right? We got to do so much more and so fast. And so we are also looking at virtual ways of teaching radical listening, virtual ways of having a platform where those radical listening needs of communities could be seen all over the world, and businesses and governments and individuals and, you know, other nonprofits could see the needs that the communities are asking for and then be able to meet those needs.
Wow. Am I hearing that your mission is shifting, Kinari? Kind of, you're also becoming the radical listening.
It's not shifting, it's just growing.
Okay. Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's expanding.
Yeah. It has to.
Mm-hmm. And
All of us have to.
Vuslat, what about you?
I love listening to both Mary and Kinari, and especially how Kinari is working with the communities and using the power of listening to showcase and to create impact. What we have been seeing the mission of generous listening just very recently, less than a year now, a little more than a year. And it has been really the seeding time for us. And now we are bringing together the practices of generous listening. How do we create the practices of generous listening, especially through arts and storytelling, so that we can really give a very easy tool for everyone to adopt in their lives. And as we have decided this, just few days after this, how do we create this toolkit, our unique toolkit that involves art and storytelling as in the practice of generous listening. We got this offer from Venice Biennale, which is world's one of the, I think, biggest art platforms, which they said our team is how do we live together. And up until now, we thought about the visual aspects of how do we live together, what kind of spaces do we create, and so forth. And will you please bring the listening aspect to it, since you've been working on this so much? So going back to Mary, it's also an excitement and a panic that took us over. And but it's good because it also gave us a deadline or launch date, which is May. So we are working towards that deadline, only have few months to go. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come up, because there's so much really very, very strong and very rich practices around listening, so much experience, like Kinari pointed out, 4,000 hours of listening, crazy, so much experience. As our foundation moves forward, our intention is, what is the art, playfulness of art, bringing down the borders of walls and so forth. How do we bring that imaginative power in these practices? So that's our project. And that's what
very, very exciting. And I think it's like a testimony of how contagious this vision is, because, you know, any organization trying to figure out how we're going to survive as a planet, I mean, they have to be interested in radical listening, generous listening. And I just thought, kind of hassling with technology and how we adapt to the pandemic. Also, I think it was very inspiring Mary and Kinari. Thank you for that. I almost imagined like a step counter or a listening counter. You know, can we log in how many hours we spend a day deeply listening and how many hours we spend just downloading or something. So
Can I just jump in and say one thing? It's so interesting to me because when I first wanted to start teaching the rest of my team about radical listening, because some people are good at listening and some people are less good, right? And I looked it up online. I'm like, oh, there's got to be lots of courses, you know, like how do you, no, like, well, there's almost, it's the most important thing we do every day. And we're never taught about it, right? The listening to your body language, listening to the emotion behind the words, listening. I mean, why are we not taught this, right? Thank you, Mary, for working on this. Thank you, Wasla, for like figuring out how to like expand those ideas. Cause like, what? It's the most important thing we do.
But you know, I love what you're saying that, excuse me for departing a little bit, but the hardest thing when I started Roots of Empathy, my golly, it's like 25 years ago. The hardest thing was training our instructors to shut up and listen. Because, you know, most of them had experience working with children and it was all about telling, not yelling, but telling. And because we work with this idea of, well, really Socratic method, that we only ask experiential questions. There's no right answers. And the whole idea, the children's questions are the right questions. You have to ask some questions to get them going. The most difficult thing was to gag our instructors. So once they got it, that the thing was to be listening to the children and help them listen to the baby, it was a new world. But I agree with you. I was breaking my teeth trying to find respectful ways of helping people shut up. So we did crack that nut eventually.
It appears so. Mary, I want to actually, it kind of flowed very nicely. I wanted to ask you, so, you know, we're using interchangeably listening and empathy and deep listening and so on. So how are these things related to one another, in your opinion? And also, how do they play out, listening and empathy, in your work?
They're almost inextricably linked in our work because we see empathy as two tracks: cognitive empathy, which is perspective taking, but also affective empathy, which is emotion. And in our cultures, we are pretty good, particularly in business. Successful business folk are very good at cognitive empathy. But it doesn't mean that just because you can understand how someone feels, if you don't have the ability to feel with them, which is what generous listening or deep listening is, it's joining the person. And if you don't have that capacity for affective empathy, you'll never have empathy action. You're not going to see any real change. You can be an armchair empath. So for me, it's a very sort of fundamental connection. And, you know, when you look at little children developing empathy and their ability to take it into the rest of their lives, if they don't have the capacity to listen, they really won't be able to develop this. And the unfortunate thing is, we tend not to listen to children. We tend to dismiss them and deny their emotions. For instance, if a child says, oh, you know, Daddy, I'm scared there's a boogeyman under the bed. And if the parent says, don't be so foolish, there's nothing to be scared about, you have denied the child their feeling. Instead of acknowledging that it is not a rational fear, but it's a very predictable, typical fear of a certain age. So if we start by listening to what even children are saying, they start listening to one another, and it's really a knock-on effect. So I really think empathy and generous or deep thinking or listening or radical listening are very much connected, and the one influences the other. And I think this whole idea of not rushing people and being, you know, you talked about, I think, Wuslat, in the beginning, you talked about how difficult it is sometimes to listen. And sometimes you don't want to hear what's difficult. but you have to work hard at it, and then it becomes a joy and easier. Well, it's the same with empathy. So I think if you're skiing along a path, you've got your right ski and your left ski, but you'll end up in the same direction.
Thank you, Mary. And do you see it kind of play out in Roots of Empathy in your workshops?
Yes, yeah, we absolutely do, because, for example, what's happening right now, in one of the first classes that we give children in our new R-Line program, we say, our little Roots of Empathy baby who was born this summer is a COVID baby, and they won't understand what happened in the first year of their lives. So we listen to the parent explain to the children what they've missed, that the grandparents weren't part of it, they couldn't share the first tooth, all these things. But also the children have written a history book from their classroom, which is the story to the baby, letters to the baby. This is what happened in the year you were born. And cumulatively, all those stories are read to one another, much like art. And the power of storytelling, narrative, really eclipses conversation. So the power of these stories, that children listen intently and with their full heart and their full presence to the stories that other children have told. And of course, when you tell a baby the story of what happened to you in your life in this first year of the pandemic, you are sharing who you are, all your vulnerabilities, and you make yourself precious and appealing in your vulnerability to one another. So it breaks down the barriers of who's who in the classroom, and that, the metaphorical class system we have everywhere. So that when you have story like this, and when you have deep listening, you show respect. When you show respect, it's inclusion, it's belonging, it's all those things which make us feel full, so that we can contribute out and give back to the world.
Thank you, Mary. And I know there are some great kind of visuals, and you share everything very openly on Roots of Empathy website. So I strongly urge all our participants, guests, to take a look. Vuslat, I want to turn to you, because you are working kind of across fields that are not really connected currently. So the art world, the business world, both very familiar to you, and then the education systems. So what is the disconnect you are seeing, and how do you connect the dots there?
How we see listening is not only relational. I think this is a very important point I need to make before I go into the different fields that we work on. Listening has to be to yourself in order to be relational as well, and nature is a big part of it. So it's a three-dimensional process, and it all feeds each other, are supportive of each other. And when we talk about listening to the other, it's usually listening to the other, and you go out there either to fix something, or to find a solution, or to get something out for yourself. Whereas when we looked in the system, it's not only listening to the vulnerable people who we don't hear their voices, but it's also those change leaders, in the art world, philanthropy, business world, education world, those people with power to make things change. Those are the people that need to listen to themselves and to each other and to nature, without a judgment of I can fix it and I can help, but with a whole open heart of what do I learn from this process? It's such a humbling process. And without the power, I think it's changing the power dynamic in a way as well, without really tackling those positions or people at power and working with them, going into a very honest, modest, humbling journey, and saying, what do we do? Where do we not listen to ourselves so that we block the other one? what is it that we, what is the approach that we put forward when we try to listen to the other? Without doing that, we came to the conclusion that we're not going to be, have the impact we want to do. So we chose this area. It seems like education, arts, and storytelling, business, philanthropy. Wow, so many different, um, so many different. What do you call concentrations, right? But in the end, we are taking out a layer where anyone who is in a position of making a change, which we call change leaders, then we work with them. This is how we wanted to approach and bring listening as a way to make it, as you pointed out, Zainab, a norm of communication and connectedness.
I think
So
it's
change
amazing.
leaders are in all these fields that come together to learn.
And I guess the inversion will happen because kind of letting go of power is so counterintuitive, but also so liberating. So,
Exactly.
and it's kind of, it's amazing that you take on this. I think we have a game plan. So Wuslat works on this level, Mary
Yes.
works for the on the early childhood. So it's kind of
Exactly.
mitigated from the beginning, and Kinari just saves us all so that we don't we don't boil ourselves to death on the planet, and basically it's kind of the world saved. I have two more questions, one specifically to Kinari, and then one last one to all our speakers, which I think the participants will find very useful. But Kinari, first over to you. So you kind of touched on this in your previous sharing, but kind of what does it look like to radically listen to people, and just to kind of draw a picture in our minds, what is it like?
Yeah, so what we do is we gather groups of people in a community. So these are usually leaders. We find that they're very important. Usually they are leaders for a reason. So we want to make sure they're in the circle. Women, men, people from lots of different backgrounds. If it's an ethnically mixed community, making sure that your circle is also ethnically mixed. And then just putting people in a circle, asking an open-ended question, and then the really hard part, shutting up. Right? Sitting there with your notebook and just like listening for an hour and a half. And then what I find is like it's like a web in the group, right? Like there's ideas that have resonance and people get really excited about them, and you can see it in their body language. And there's ideas that just fall flat, right? And finding where those, and it's an enormous amount of effort to listen for an hour and a half in that way. Like it takes my full energy, right? And we usually have two listeners. We find women are the best listeners because of our socialization, right? There are men who are good listeners, but it's less common. Also, we find that when women are the listeners, other women feel more comfortable to speak. And then we just wait until there's this like moment of like, there's like the energy drops in the room where everyone's like, those are the solutions. And they're kind of, people fall a little more quiet and they're like, yep, we got it. And then you reflect back. Did I hear this correctly? Are these the things that are the key solutions? And you keep reflecting until everyone says, yeah, that's it, right? So that for us, and then you actually do what they say. Yeah, unless the harder part of the radical listening.
I really appreciate that emphasis, kind of what happens after, kind of as a social entrepreneur in your work. And this is so interesting because yesterday there was a session specifically on Black women's leadership. And the last question there was, how do we prepare the conditions so that women of color, women from the global South are leading? And it was very similar in a way. First, there was a point of shutting up, and then kind of setting the environment in a circular, or being mindful of the environment the listening is taking place, for example, or imitating the community as much as you can in the leadership, so that it's not just about women kind of a matriarchy, but it's about leaders reflecting the community and so on. So a lot resonated with me. Finally,
just to say too, it's always a local community person, an insider who's listening with, we like to have an outsider. And the reason we like to have an outsider is because it helps people frame things a little differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to explain it to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
which can also be useful.
Mm-hmm. And my last question, actually, I wanted to ask you kind of, and this was mentioned by Vuslat from minute one, that it's not easy, it takes effort. I mean, paradoxically, it's the effort that makes everything effortless. So I want to ask you, what are your power sources that enable you to listen generously in your personal lives? And Vuslat, I want to ask you first, if you have any go-to places, tricks,
And
the magic sauce.
my go-to place is to have a voice to my inner self, and that is for me through art. I do sculpturing, and through meditation, also connecting in nature. I think those are the three most important things where I use my creativity. I try to silence my mind, and I try to connect with nature. These are, and I do have a ritual that to keep them really in my life. Otherwise, we become captured by the speed, the chaos, this and that. And I really find it very, very important that we keep those rituals in life. It connects to my true self, and then I become a better person. This is how I see, and I listen better to myself and to others. Yeah, that's my go-to places.
And by ritual, you mean kind of being disciplined about it, or?
Disciplined about it, exactly.
Mhm.
Morning ritual or morning meditation. Take a week in a day in a week in nature, and then also have time for creativity and be radical, as Canary says about it.
Perfect. Mary, would you like to share your power source?
Yeah, I think my power source is curiosity. That I'm deeply curious, and it's a real aggravation, to tell you the truth, because it doesn't help you be still. I'm not very often still. It's something I've been working on for decades. I find I have my best, most creative and calming moments in playgrounds. Where I live, there are 3 children's playgrounds within a 5 to 7 minute walk. And I feel completely rejuvenated, filled up, hopeful, and thoughtful when I'm able to watch the careless abandon of children playing without rules, without not playing games, but just playing wild. You know, it's probably Canary, what you love in the work that you're in, and also in art, the abandon of being able to create something without boundaries or restrictions of any kind, to connect to your inner self. So I get fueled by ideas that come to me just because I'm curious, and then by children in playgrounds. And I wonder, Ezgi, if you could just put up those 2 pictures. I forgot to share them with you, but I have 2 pictures of children listening deeply, or what you might call radically or generously. The little girl is blind, and she's in a Roots of Empathy class. And she had been hearing so deeply everything about the baby. She could tell us things about the baby that nobody else had noticed. She's only 5. And she needed to touch the baby. And there is this wisdom and hopefulness in babies. The baby was just as curious about her as she was about the baby. And the next one, Ezgi. This is just a typical class, and this is a younger group. We do teach children up to 12 and 13, but the children automatically got down to the eye level of the baby, to really understand and listen to that baby, because the baby was talking to them, not through words, but through the whole body and vocalization. And I think this is what is inspiring to me, the endless yearning children have for connection. And if we can kind of pull from them this ability to automatically want to connect without effort. As an adult, it would take me much more effort to do what they're doing joyfully. It's a game, it's fun. And we kind of lose that ability. So I regenerate by watching children in free, unstructured play.
Thank you, Mary. I mean, the pictures are so alive. It's like they are, I mean, everyone there are so alive is my first reaction. And again, it's what being able to listen perhaps does to one, kind of that rejuvenation. And thank you for sharing your tips. And Kinari, what are your tips for radical listening?
I love that you asked this question, because I feel like in my own evolution as a person, it was the thing that I got to last, sort of, or I'm sure there's a lot more to go, but you know, listening to myself, right? And really meditating, turning inward, really seeing what it is I needed and wanted. And that was very hard, and has been also joy and a real calming in my own life as well. And also listening to nature, you know, just being in the wild is so healing, you know, and it's one of the reasons that we need to save these forests on our planet. It's not just about their carbon or their water cycling systems, or, you know, it's about the beauty and the connection, the deep, deep connection.
Thank you, all of you, for so generously sharing kind of your insights and your toolboxes as well. We have a few questions from the audience. Ezgi, can you share one or two with us, and we will wrap up in a few minutes?
Sure. There are so many reflections and questions from the audience, and they're actually thanking every one of you and vocalizing that they love this session. Thank you for that on behalf of them. And there's a question from Janan. She's asking, why do people in general find listening so difficult? What is the biggest learned bias or root cause that listening becomes so difficult?
Seems like Mary better answer that one.
Well, I'm happy to, but I think Vuzlet has really studied this in a big way. And why don't you start?
I believe there are a few things. One of them is the fear. When we speak, we know what we say, what we don't say. We can control it. But when we really tap into that space and surrender to listening, we don't know what's going to come up. And is it also, this is true for when we listen to ourselves, but also to others. So it's an unknown territory. It's conversing. You don't know what's going to come up, and there's a fear of hearing things that you're not going to like or feel comfortable. I think this is one thing. And then the other thing is also we want to be heard. So in a way, because of I think the system that humanity has built already, we want to, in order to be heard, we are all in a rush to express. So paradoxically, it's also the fear of not going to be heard. That's why we keep on cutting off each other, interrupting, screaming, with the anxiety that we won't be seen, we won't be heard. And it's just making it impossible to have a space for listening. So I'm so happy that Ashoka is holding this panel And I'm grateful for Mary Canary and all the audiences who listen and be part of this.
I just like to, I loved your response on that. The only thing I would like to add on to it is if we've been hurt or if we feel that we're not appreciated or we're not important enough or we're not filled up enough, if we give the light and listen to somebody else, sometimes there's a sense that they might be taking our power. And exactly as Buzlat said, having worked with long time ago with young women who are victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse, they didn't have the ability to listen. And they had been, a lot had been taken from them. And I think you have to have trust in yourself that you don't need to be the star. You can put yourself on the back burner. You don't diminish yourself by giving someone else the light. So I think I really like that question, and I think we all could talk about that forever.
Yeah. I'll just say when we've tried to teach radical listening to other organizations, they often come up against this point of fear too. Like, we can't ask the communities what they want. They'll all ask for $1 million in their pocket. Like, no way. Are you kidding? Right? Even organizations that have worked with communities for like 20 years, right? Like, just trust us. And it does work. So.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And there are some more questions, but we're going to have to close. But we can continue to connect. So if you're registered for the summit, we can continue having a conversation. So sorry. Actually, it's like a caricature of someone trying to listen very hard, and her grandmother calling her for the third time. So very sorry about that. So we can continue to connect. We're going to share the social media handles of our speakers. So if you want to continue listening to them on the social media, please go ahead. And we wish you a rest of the day where you are able to listen generously and you are listened to generously as well. Thank you to all our speakers and our participants, and stay well.
Thank you.